When building a sequel to a successful game, developers often walk a fine line. Stick too closely to the original and risk stagnation. Stray too far, and you might lose your dedicated audience. Early impressions suggested Ghost of Yōtei leaned toward the former, but the final result reveals something more compelling. Not only is Yōtei a remarkable sequel, it's also a visually stunning and confidently executed evolution of the original. As before, Ghost of Yōtei opens with sweeping, living landscapes that stretch out endlessly towards the horizon. The game's opening title sequence expertly combines perfectly placed musical notes with the appearance of the primary companies involved, followed by a title card. The power of such a sequence cannot be understated. It sets the tone for what's to come, and Ghost of Yōtei pulls it off beautifully. But before you take to the fields at the foot of the mountain, you're introduced to the character Atsu, whose family is murdered before her eyes at the foot of a burning tree by Lord Saito and his gang. We're then treated to a beautifully animated, ink-style introduction sequence. Atsu has returned to her homeland 16 years later, with an eye for revenge. You begin by cleverly writing the names of your targets using the touchpad, which serves as your belt during your journey. The introduction mission focuses on the snake. During this sequence, I immediately noticed that the game seemed to be running near 4K at 30 frames per second. Naturally, I headed straight to the options menu to see if 60 FPS was available instead. What I discovered was a welcome surprise. You see, Ghost of Yōtei supports ray tracing. Now, ray-traced lighting is a perfect match for an expansive game like this, yet prior to release, any online search pairing Ghost of Yōtei with ray tracing would have come up empty. It's a feature the developers have never promoted or even mentioned, but it's here, quietly waiting to be found, and the results are excellent both on the base and professional PlayStation 5s. If you're playing on a PS5 Pro even, you can enjoy it at a full 60 frames per second. But of course, you might wonder, what does it actually do? Well, in a word, global illumination, but with some limitations. Essentially, it seems to add an additional pass of ray trace lighting to the scenery, allowing for proper, precise bounce lighting with color transfer. To illustrate what I mean, check this out. Without ray tracing enabled, the pots visible in this scene exhibit a moderate orangish glow as a result of the sun, but it lacks any sort of precision and direction, and the shadowed areas are dark. Enabling ray tracing, however, immediately showcases a stark difference. Light travels from the window, bounces off the wooden shelf, and light is reflected up onto the underside of each clay jug. It's very localized and precise, suggesting a per-pixel solution. What it essentially means is that the scenes are lit with increased precision and realism, and while not as robust as games designed from the ground up for RTGI, the results are excellent all the same, and is my recommended way of playing the game. You can clearly observe here how ray tracing contributes to subtle light bounce effects. Note the illumination visible on the underside of Atsu's hat, a detail that would be absent using a purely rasterized solution. This implementation simply allows for a more robust simulation of light transport. That said, while it does greatly enhance the presentation as you've seen here so far, the implementation itself appears to be a hybrid of sorts, likely building on the existing Pro-based system. It's evident in how NPCs tend to stand out visually. They lack the grounded integration you'd expect if they were part of the ray tracing acceleration structure, not unlike what we've seen in software-based Lumen implementations. The game also still leverages a lot of screen space effects such as ambient occlusion, as opposed to the more natural contact shadows you might get from a more robust RTGI. Interestingly, Atsu herself seems to be treated differently. I noticed color bleed from her outfit appearing on nearby geometry such as trees, the light from the sun bouncing off of it. You'll note that even when she's occluded from view, The tree exhibits a residual yellow glow, which suggests that she alone may be included in the BVH structure, allowing for more accurate light interactions where it matters. Now, this isn't as comprehensive or robust as the full RTGI suite seen in other games, such as Doom: The Dark Ages, but the inclusion of ray tracing here still elevates the visual presentation to the next level, allowing it to feel like a noticeable upgrade over the PS4 original. It adds nuance and depth to the lighting model, and for those playing on PS5 Pro, I'd absolutely recommend playing with this mode. That said, the traditional rasterized lighting path remains impressive in its own right. Technically, it's comparable to the original game, but the artistry has evolved. The environments feel more cohesive and visually rich this time, even though they were already beautiful in the original. Many of the strengths we highlighted in the original video return here. The volumetric cloud simulation, for instance, is once again superb with minimal breakup and excellent variation. It really breathes life into these landscapes. The overall atmospheric light scattering, especially when standing atop a tall mountain, is breathtaking. Weather effects build on the foundation laid by the previous title as well, and the addition of dynamic particles and foliage adds a layer of realism to every scene. A particularly delightful touch is the interaction with the foliage, specifically sprinting through leaf-covered arenas leaves behind trails of leaves, fluttering and scattering in your wake, a subtle but effective detail. The original had something like this too, but it was much less robust, as you can see, not leaving the trails or producing as many leaves. So it's a noticeable upgrade. Beyond this, the game's bold color palette and vibrant landscapes are beautifully presented using HDR. Yōtei leverages the full dynamic range, delivering stark contrast between shadowed interiors and brilliant sunlight. On a calibrated HDR display, it's breathtaking, and this video is of course presented in HDR, so if you have such a display, it should give you an idea. But of course, the settings that I captured with here were adjusted for my TV specifically, and it can vary. But arguably the most impressive aspect of the visual design lies in its sense of scale, not just in terms of map size, but in its perception. Sucker Punch has truly mastered the art of making the world feel vast. Sweeping valleys curve into towering mountains, and the terrain design amplifies the illusion of grandeur. It's not just big, it feels big, a subtle distinction, but a meaningful one. This is further enhanced by smart environmental cues, plumes of smoke such as those indicating key points on the map, shifting weather patterns, and fields of white flowers guide the player organically. Ride through these flowers and you're rewarded with a traversal speed boost, a clever touch that gamifies exploration without breaking immersion. The sheer density of reactive foliage, all swaying and responding to your movement, reinforces the sense of a living, breathing world. It's wonderful stuff. Equally, the character models are impressively detailed once again, just like the first game. From facial features and eye rendering that you can see in this scene, which are very realistic, to the weapons of battle carefully dangling from her outfit. The in-game models are top tier, and you can zoom way in and still see a ton of detail. It's definitely a strength of the game's visuals. I'd also say that the actual animation in-game is superb, with smooth movement, especially during combat, that does feel even better than the original game. Your horse then plays a role as well, and looks great in this game as you barrel through huge fields of grass. If we shift over to story sequences then, there's still a significant distinction between the high-quality cinematic scenes and normal dialogue sequences. So the cinematics, the big story moments, these are of impeccable quality with brilliant lighting, effects, framing, and animation work. They were already excellent in the original game, and that's the case here with even more visual flair. I'll talk more about this shortly, but I do want to mention that the storytelling in this game is also leagues beyond the original. It's very well done. However, not every scene can realistically be produced this way, so exactly like the first game and many other open world games to be fair, these secondary scenes are used instead, and in this game the animations are rather limited, so the gap between the two feels a little greater than usual. This is an area where Horizon Forbidden West massively improved on its prequel, but here it's not all that different from the previous title. It's kind of similar to something like the Like a Dragon series, which has these amazing directed cutscenes with subpar character interaction sequences. But while we're on the animation, there's something else I wanted to touch on. In my original video, I complained about this, specifically the way the character interacts with slopes and steps. It's not a huge deal, but it does influence how the character sort of interacts with the terrain while simply walking or running. Did they improve it? Well, this time it does seem that foot IK, inverse kinematics, is used here, but the actual movement and animation when walking up and down slopes or stairs still doesn't properly reflect the terrain. It's a lot like the first game, which means when doing these actions, it looks a bit awkward. I was really hoping they would solve it, but alas, here we are. Another holdover from the last game is the reliance on screen space reflections with cube maps as the fallback, for reflections of course. By and large, it works well enough, but as usual, the typical SSR artifacts do rear their head from time to time, and unsurprisingly, cube maps don't always match the scenery. Still, aside from those tiny nitpicks, the overall presentation in this game is fantastic. It's a beautiful game, a beautiful world, and a wonderful evolution of the original. It still has its weaknesses, but overall, I do think Ghost of Yōtei is a stunning, evocative experience, and I'm always happy to see a non-Unreal Engine-based open world game hit the scene. So, let's say you're jumping in, you're sold on the game, you want to give it a shot. You might be wondering then, what's the best way to play? After all, when you open up the options menu, you'll find up to 4 different graphics modes, 3 on the base PS5, and 4 on PS5 Pro. So, what do they do, and how do they impact the game? When starting the game for the first time then, Yōtei targets 30 frames per second, with a resolution of 3840 by 2160 or native 4K, without ray tracing. If you're looking for the best image quality, this is the mode to go with. When counting the base PS5, I usually got around 28 out of 30 pixels, so the resolution is a little below 4K, but the image quality is still excellent. Then there's the performance mode, which targets 60 frames per second. This one drops down to around 1440p, also without ray tracing. The base PS5 version, however, is closer to 1080p, just slightly above. Then there's the normal ray tracing mode, which is capped at 30 frames per second, but is available on both regular and professional PlayStation 5s. This one comes in around 1728p or so from what I've found, but closer to 1440p on the base system. And thanks to the excellent TAA in the game, it's still very sharp and crisp, but you can use RT features. My favorite mode though is the RT Pro option. This one offers 60 FPS gameplay with ray tracing, but it also leans on PSSR for anti-aliasing and upsampling, at least as far as I can tell. The base resolution is a lot lower though, weighing in around 1080p, but the overall image quality is still pretty good in most scenes, but I did find an occasional issue, like here, look at this fine-grained cloth pattern. It's okay enough in the other mode, right? But when you switch to the RT Pro mode, you see a lot of extra noise and sparkle here, likely as a result of PSSR. Conversely, there are areas where the PSSR version has advantages over even the highest resolution quality mode. Like here, there's more stability on the wooden planks on the side of this house, specifically when using PSSR. Honestly, in terms of overall image quality, I do tend to think that the PSSR version trades blows with the highest resolution 4K mode. It's really good. The thing is though, I can't really say that any of the modes are bad per se. They each have their own trade-offs and all deliver the expected results. So it's basically about tilting the needle in the direction that you prefer, right? And this is also true of performance, which thankfully is rather dull. You see, the 30 FPS modes deliver 30 FPS, and that's that. In my testing, I actually struggled to find even a single dip when using these two modes, but you would expect that, right? It's 30 FPS. 60 frames per second, though, is where things get a little more interesting, because if you recall, the state of play featuring this game recently exhibited major performance problems, which left me wondering about the state of the game and its final release. Thankfully, the final game does not have these issues. The overwhelming majority of the time, it delivers a completely locked 60 frames per second without leaning on VRR at all. It's just completely stable. And it was smooth on both the Pro and base consoles. After about 15 hours of play though, I did actually finally find some slowdown, and it occurred during this battle here. But the key here is that the day one patch, which is supposed to arrive alongside the launch of the game, very specifically says that they will be implementing performance improvements for big battles in dense spaces, like this I assume. So given how rare slowdown seems to be already in this current build, I would say we're looking pretty good for launch, and this may be completely cleaned up by then. All this is to say that the framerate situation is excellent, and by and large you shouldn't encounter many dips at all, so the news on this front is great. That said, beyond the frame rate, I noticed a couple of very odd performance related bugs. Basically, in exactly 2 instances, the game randomly started dropping the sound, and then suddenly, it seized up. I thought the whole thing crashed, but after 10 to 20 seconds or so, the game actually came back and continued as normal. It's hard to say if this is a pre-release bug or not, and maybe it'll be fixed by the time the game launches, but I wanted to flag it here in case you encounter it. So to summarize the presentation, the team has done a great job balancing improvements with development time. It's not a complete overhaul of their tech from the last game by any means, but it also kinda didn't need to be, and what's here looks fantastic. The improvements are certainly welcome. Beyond that, it has great image quality across the board in every mode, and runs almost perfectly with only the occasional hiccup here and there. So that's all good stuff, right? But there's another strength I have not touched on yet, and that's the audio. When it comes to building atmosphere and selling the world, sound and sound mixing are extremely important. In that sense, Yōtei is a masterpiece. For starters, cutscene audio is mixed almost like a film, with active use of all available sound channels, or the surround sound effect of the PS5 when using headphones, along with excellent clarity on speech and separation of the sound effects. Take a listen.
あの女だ。
迷子か？
昔なじみを探してる。妖帝6人衆。
つまみ出せ。
The Kurosawa mode also returns, which obviously changes the look, but something I didn't mention before is that it also influences the sound to more closely resemble classic Kurosawa films like this.
殺してやる。
剣吾という火事が作った刀だな。
それがどうした？
俺の父だ。
お主、松か。
圧だ。
But the key thing here is the ambiance, the soundscape you hear while actually playing. Whether you're using headphones or a surround sound setup, there's some serious immersion here. For instance, exploring the countryside during a rainstorm yields remarkable results. Just listen carefully to this next sample. Pay attention to how the rain sound itself actually changes based on your position, and you can sort of hear the water bouncing off different types of objects all around you, not to mention the surround sound effect of the music being played in the nearby inn, and everything else. Just pay close attention. When things heat up as well, it sounds great too. That same scene here, only during combat, sounds like this. But then there's the Watanabe mode, which is a collaboration between Sucker Punch and Shinichiro Watanabe, director of Cowboy Bebop and Samurai Champloo. Now, this sounds silly on paper, pairing lo-fi beats with a game like this, but it's also a tribute to Nujabes, the late composer for Samurai Champloo, and honestly, I was kind of surprised at how well it works. Just listen to this here. Given the type of story they're telling, it fits better than I expected. It's good stuff. So basically, if you have a good sound system, or at least a solid set of cans, crank this game up and soak it all in because it's one of the best sounding games I've heard thus far this year. Before we go though, I want to talk briefly about the game itself. There were a lot of things to love in the original, but I also kinda bounced off it. The pacing just didn't do much for me, and while I did have some fun, I didn't enjoy it as much as I had hoped. Ghost of Yōtei, however, despite pre-release expectations, has managed to grab my attention in a way that the original never did. I think it comes down to a few things. Firstly, the characters and storytelling are simply more compelling this time. Conceptually, you're hunting down the Six, and each one has its own unique area and story beats. The personalities are ramped up, making encounters more interesting as well. You really want to see where it'll go next, and the way your character interacts with everyone is also very compelling. It's reminiscent of classic films such as Lady Snowblood, especially when they toy with things from the past and present. But it's what happens in each of these locations that surprised me the most. Rather than focusing on simple repetitive tasks, which is kind of what we saw in the original, there's just a lot more variety this time. There are separate, unique areas dedicated just to the story scenes. There's new interior spaces, underground areas, and more to explore. There's puzzles to solve, unique combat scenarios, and more. When taking down something like a base as well, if you just rush straight for the boss, he'll call in his guards at a certain point, overwhelming you in the process. But if you stealth through instead, eliminating guards first, you can thin out the numbers, changing the encounter in the process. So even these types of scenarios feel more varied. The key is that there is just more variety and more unique crafted scenarios to enjoy, the kind you might expect from a more linear game like God of War, along with improvements to the overall open world flow of the game. Plus, the new maps are more beautiful and interesting to explore, and the hunt for each of the Six really does feel unique. In fact, I could hardly put this game down during coverage. I just kind of wanted to keep going. In that sense, it might stand as one of the very best games Sucker Punch has ever made. Really impressive work here. Overall then, we do have this beautiful, smooth performing, great sounding game with an excellent story, engaging characters, and solid gameplay. I went into it expecting just more of the same, but I walked away genuinely loving it. It is the better game. But that's going to do it for this video, so I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.